Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nidus Anarchy series. I'm your host Adam, the CIO of Nidus, and today we're going to talk about 6 ways to save you a crap ton of money on your cloud costs. When I'm talking a crap ton, these methods have saved my clients over $500,000 a year in cloud costs. Oh, it's so good. And look at that frost on that bottle. Look at that. It's so nice. Oh, so good. Again, we're not sponsored by Jaeger, but hey, Jaeger, if you want to sponsor us, let's talk. Okay, so let's talk about cloud costs. Let's talk about how we're going to save you a ton of money. So first off, everything I'm going to talk about is generally geared towards Amazon AWS, but it can be used and replicated across all the clouds: Azure, GCP, Google, Oracle Cloud, whatever. All of these things, they'll work everywhere for you. But these are the main 6 items that I go into clients, and when I try to help them reduce their cloud costs, these are the number ones that are always consuming the most amount of money that we can quickly save a ton of cash. When I'm saying a ton of cash, one client, their bill was about $60,000 a year. We reduced that spend to just under $15,000 a year. Another large client was doing, let's just say, I don't want to give their total bill away because they're pretty big, but we saved them over $500,000 a year. It's around just over $40,000 a month in cloud costs just from these simple items that I'm going to talk about here. Obviously, we went into a lot more depth because we were on site, but these 6 items will save you a ton of money. So let's just go through them one at a time, right? So the first one are your instance sizings. Most people get these all wrong. Why? Because when they're planning about building out these servers for whatever application infrastructure they're going to do, they wind up just saying, hey, let's just go for the max. Like, they're thinking data center, right? They're thinking, oh, hey, I need something that's, going to be able to scale for the load that we're going to have and whatever. And they keep forgetting this is the cloud. These instances can scale and they should be built to scale. So cloud sizing of your instances is hugely important. Really look what you need to do. And one quick way to do this is just look at the history. Go into your monitoring tab and just look. What's the CPU utilization? What's the hard drive utilization? What's the memory utilization? If you're not using it, shrink it down. Like, you should be, even if these instances are pegged at like 40, 50%, who cares? It's fine. You can always increase those instances or increase your, horizontally. You can spin up additional instances and just distribute the load as necessary as demand needs. But don't think you need to have these huge beefy boxes, especially when they're not being used. This client we were talking to, they never went above, I think, 4% utilization. These servers are so monstrously oversized. So look at all your instances, look at what the utilization, and start sizing those things down. You're going to see some massive costs right out of the gate. That's generally the most expensive thing that's on people's list that we can save them a ton of money with. Second one is going to be log retentions. This one this one's overlooked a lot, right? Because people are just like, logs, it's like, oh, I just use logs for troubleshooting, but they don't think you're actually being charged for all that log retention. And especially if you're doing crazy verbose logging, those things can get pretty insane. Like some clients that we have, some large financial, let's say banking clients, we have Lambdas and stuff that they're hitting 4 billion interactions of a Lambda a month. Those logs get insane. Well, by default, most logs are saved indefinitely, meaning they're going to save everything. Change your log retention. Just what do you actually need it to be? If you actually need those logs forever, create a system to offload those logs into an S3 or even better, which we'll talk about later, onto Glacier, something like that. But change your log retention. Just go into CloudWatch, go down, change the retention, put it all to the bare minimum. If it's dev, whatever, change this shit to a month, maybe down even to a week if you don't really even need the logs. That right there is going to save you a bunch of money right out of the gate. Next, auto shut off instances. This one is like the one that's so simple to do and will save you a ton of money. And I do not understand why everyone is not doing this. So it's exactly what it is. Every day, turn off your instances that are not needed, that are not by your developers and stuff like that. Just auto shut off. You can create a CloudWatch rule that will just fire off a Lambda that will then turn off all your instances that you don't need. Right? There's a ton of dev environments and just, you spin up instances for whatever reason. You're not using it anymore. You don't even know what that is. Right? So just every day, 6 o'clock, they turn off. And then you can do one of two things. One, you can turn it back on at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. or whatever. Or you can just make it so that your developers or your engineers can turn on the instances as needed. So this way, they don't ever turn back on unless they're actively being used. What I also like to do, kind of a little hack here, is I like to do auto shut off like at certain intervals after 6 p.m. So I'll do an auto shut off at 6 p.m. and I'll do another one at midnight, and then I'll do another one at 6 a.m. So this way if someone comes on and says, oh, I'm going to work late tonight, and they do some stuff, this way it's not running overnight. At midnight, it kills it again. And all my engineers know, hey, at 6 p.m., midnight, and 6 a.m., these servers are going to turn off. So if you're doing something, just be prepared. They're going to fire off. Or turn the CloudWatch rule off temporarily, but just make sure I have another Lambda that just checks it. So every 24 hours, it just checks and says, hey, is this CloudWatch rule off? And turn it back on again, just in case that gets turned off. You're going to save so much money right out of the gate. I mean, just think how many dev environments, stage, test, QA, you have all these things, and some of them even mirror production in size. So they could be huge. But are you using them at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday? Probably not. So set your instances to scheduled to turn off and turn on, and you're going to save probably a third of your bill right there, just from that one alone. Next, we're going to talk about S3 storage. So everyone dumps all your files and everything for Amazon. It's S3. Azure and Google, they have their own file storage as well. But those are meant for kind of short-term use, in the sense where you're going to need it regularly, right? Like you're going to need to download the file or check in on them, or you need access to them, or something else is going to pull and use them all the time. So for stuff that you're like, hey, look, I want to store this, but I'm going to need this, I don't know, maybe once or twice a year, or only when we do an audit or whatever, take those files and offload them into long-term storage, like, Glacier or whatever, because then what they'll do is they'll put that stuff on tape backup or something, and your cost drops significantly. You could save 90% on storage costs for stuff that you don't actively need right away. You're going to pay more when you need to retrieve the data, but if it's data you're really never going to need and you're just consuming terabytes of information, put that in a different area. Don't put it in S3. Don't put it in immediate access storage, because you're just paying for an overhead that you don't need. So try to figure out where you can save money there. That's another big one. The other one is going to be Lambda optimization. So for all your microservices and your functions, your cloud functions, whatever you're using, optimize those to use the right amount of RAM, and make sure that they have two other things. You want to make sure that the concurrency setting is set properly. So by default, I think Lambda say at like 1,000. You may not need 1,000. Like that may be too much, and at that point in time, you just have these runaway processes, and it gets locked up if you have bad code. So you might want to tweak that. But the big one is the memory. So I'm going to tell you right now, I have an article which I'll post in this on YouTube or LinkedIn, whatever, wherever we're posting this video. I'll post the link to the article, and I'll put the nice pretty picture right here of the graph. But this person did an amazing job to figure out the exact amount of memory that you want your Lambdas to fire up at to be the most efficient. And by most efficient, it's cost efficient and cold start, and obviously to process whatever this stuff is, right? So the magic number is 768 megs of RAM. So you can read the article to figure out why, or you can just blindly trust me and save yourself a ton of time and headache. And your Lambdas, unless you know what you're doing and you really think you need it otherwise, 768. You'll have the quickest startup time from a cold start, and it'll have the quickest time to process the actual calculations within the Lambda, whatever that function that's doing. Which obviously you're paying for the memory, but you're also paying for the time. So in the end, the magic number is 768 megs for RAM. Go ahead and set that up. If you try to set anything higher, you're not going to utilize it. So if you're like, oh, I want to put 2 gigs of RAM in there, that function will not use it. And on top of that, you're going to wind up paying for it, and it's going to take longer to cold start. So you're actually going to pay a lot more money. You're going to have a longer processing time, and you're going to be charged more for that Lambda. Vice versa, if you do by the default and just say, hey, we're going to leave it at 128 megs and see what happens. Well, yeah, you're going to be charged less because it's using less memory, but you're going to have way longer cold starts. The processes are going to take longer to process as well, which introduces latency. And when you're using microservices and these cloud functions, one of the biggest things you're trying to get away from is latency. Like, you want these things to fire fast, right? So 768 is the magic number. I'll link to that article. Check it out. The guy went crazy above and beyond with some amazing tests. Awesome stuff. I don't even question it anymore. Right now, unless that Lambda or that microservice is functioning bizarrely, 768 across the board. And I give it like a 30-second timeout. That's the other thing. Make sure you don't have some 10-minute timeouts. Sometimes when you're doing dev work, you might leave a 10-minute timeout because you're trying to see what happens. That can be pretty dangerous if left in place, because once you go into production or actually utilizing it, you have 1,000 of these things kicking off 10 minutes and there's a runaway, or you're not returning the response properly. Like, if you're not returning the response right, it will just run until that timeout hits. So you could be firing off 1 million Lambda requests that are going to run for 10 minutes, and you put 2 gigs on there. you're talking thousands of dollars in Lambda costs that should have only cost you a couple bucks. So the Lambda improvements could save you a ton of money as well. The last thing is going to be, I'm not sure what it is in Azure and Google, but in Amazon, it's the Cost Explorer. So if you go to /billing in your console, it will break down everything that you need to know about your bill from that particular month or the whole life cycle. What you can even go down by service, so you can find out exactly what service you're being billed for and how much. They have really cool charts and graphs and all that kind of stuff. But what I like to use it for is, one, I check that thing at least once a week because it'll tell me two things. Sorry, that's two. Hold on. I think we need another intermission from our friend. Not sponsored by Jaeger. Okay, now I can say two properly. So, when it comes down to the Billing Explorer, you can see the actual services that are being used. So I like to see runaway services, because this is where I'll find out. Like I was just demoing out. I was just playing around. I'm like, oh, let me play with I was looking at the some of their AI modeling stuff and using Kinesis to punch a bunch of data in there. Forgot about it. That thing was just running. And I wound up having like $100 bill in like 3 days. Thankfully, I caught it because I check my billing regularly to see if that happens, because it does happen more often than not, because we're constantly using our environment for dev and building out labs and stuff. So keep an eye on your billing regularly so you can see for runaway services. And the other thing is it kind of gives you that feeling, right? Like when you check it regularly, you know, it's like, okay, aren't my compute instances, I'm regularly spending $1,500 a week on compute instances. So if all of a sudden I'm like, hey, it's forecasting my compute instances to be 10% higher this week, why? Right? Like, look into that. So that Cost Explorer for me is just the beginning of a way to find out how to save a ton of money. So break it down by service, and then from there you can go down and drill down to find the actual specific thing that's costing you the most money. Do you really need it? Go through and audit and analyze that. So when we go into client sites and they say, hey, please save us some money, we say, no problem. We're guaranteeing that we're going to save you at least $100,000 every time we show up on site. We show up, we go through a whole list of things. One of the first things I like to hit is that Cost Explorer, just to get a benchmark of, hey, here's where all their money is being spent. And then from there, these are the categories I need to look into and see, is this something they actually need to be spending their money on? And is it configured properly? Those two things, you're going to save a ton of money. So like I said, these 6 things here alone have saved a client of mine over $500,000 a year. But realistically, you're going to save a ton of money just by going through this stuff. Even in your personal account, even if you have a personal cloud account, do this. I promise you, you're going to save yourself a ton of cash. So to quick recap, 6 things that are going to save you millions of dollars in your cloud costs. Number 1, EC2 instance sizing, or whatever cloud you're using. Instance sizing is going to save you a ton of cash. I promise you, most of your instances are way oversized for what you need. Number 2, turn them off. You can set up some scripts to auto turn those things off every night at 6. Ton of money being saved there. Number 3, get rid of those log files you don't need. Turn off that retention. Doesn't need to be forever. Number 4, file size retention and files retention and S3 buckets and things like that. Do you need short-term storage, or can you put it into long-term and get it back later? Save a ton of money there. Number 5, Lambda optimization. Set the memory, set the invocations, set those things out to where they're going to be right at that sweet spot. You're going to save a ton of money if you have lots of micro functions going on there. And the last one is the Cost Explorer. Look at your actual bill. Look at that itemized breakdown of those services. I promise you, you're going to find ways to save money. Lastly, I just want to talk as a recap. We talked a little bit before about the RFID stuff, and I was talking about the Faraday cage hats that I was going to get. I'm actually wearing it. I got it in, so I just wanted to show it off. Again, not sponsored, just love the product. This is Get Lambs, so Lambs is the product. So this is my Faraday hat. You can even see it's got like the nice little shiny gold on the inside. So yeah, it's just a hat, but this one is protecting my brain from melting from all the radio frequencies that are pummeling into my head. And then also I got this one. It's a little beanie. So this is my wintertime one, although I wear it even not winter. But look, yeah, it's just a little hat. So if you're going to wear a hat and you want to look as awesome as I am, why not get one that also protects you and shields you from radiation? So yeah, that's about it. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys save a ton of money. If you really want to go in depth into your company and you want to find out how to save a ton of money, hit me up anytime, adam@nidus.com. You can also follow us on YouTube and Twitter, Instagram, all those fun things at NidusIAM, NYEDISIAM. Hit us up anytime. We do specialize in saving companies a lot of money. If you want us to come out and help you out, we'd love to see what we can do. Hit me up. I'll see you around. Later.